Excellent. Right. I'll give people a minute. Numbers.
Got 23 people online.
Good. Is that enough?
Yeah, I think we can get started. And you're leading
Very
off and
prompt.
giving the
Thank you.
introduction. Yep.
Cool. Excellent. So, hi, welcome to this AU Core info session. Well, yeah, hopefully you're all in the where you think you're meant to be. We're going to talk about related person as one of the artifacts. We're talking about profiling for AU Core. So we'll probably just walk through a bit of information, material, have a discussion, try and develop our ideas around what we're doing around this particular profile, and then yeah, have some period where people can feedback further and then look to move on to other actions downstream. So let's just go ahead. So just acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today. So I pay my respects to the elders past and present and emerging. Thanks very much, and we'll move on. So I'm doing the stuff today, so there's no surprise. Yeah, so we're just looking a bit about background with R4 related person, how related person as a FHIR concept gets used, and then on to more proposal-oriented discussion. So just to kick things off, we have a Menti poll just to get people to interact a little bit, but also get some info in terms of who's here and what their interest is. So if you could join this either through the QR code on screen and or go to menti.com and enter the code there. So that's 34456159. Thanks, Danielle. So Danielle has the power to know who's responding. How are we going, Danielle?
Sorry, can you see my screen?
No.
Oh,
Yes.
it says I'm. Oh, good.
Okay.
Okay, everybody else can.
Oh, I can't.
Oh,
How weird is that?
that's
It's
very
just
strange.
me.
So we've got
Oh, hang on.
37 people
Oh, that's
online,
good as long as you
and
can see.
we've
Oh, I can see
we've
it now.
had 22. Oh no, you can see it now.
I can. That's good.
All right, I'll go
I
back
could
on
have
mute.
commentated. Cool. Oh, excellent. So that's everybody responded, I think. Just about. A few. Perfect. So lots of architects, standards developers, software developers.
Let me know when you'd like me to pop to the next one.
I think that's a pretty good result. I'm surprised there's no consumers, since I assume all of us use the healthcare system at some point. Terrific. And just to get an idea of backgrounds, the question is how well do you know AU Core? Ranging from just getting started with FHIR, good background with FHIR, or a bit beyond with really into AU Core and really into AU Core. Okay, cool. Okay, a lot of people starting out. Cool. That's great. I think that's covered most people. Yeah, so it looks like we have a lot of people just getting started with FHIR, but a few in the other categories. Yeah, so a lot of stuff we will be talking about will be pretty conceptual in nature. So yeah, hopefully, yeah, we'll try and explain what the FHIR kind of view is on some of this and see how that pans out. Cool. Thanks, Daniel. I think we're good. So hopefully I'm still sharing you.
Sorry?
Yes.
Great. So thanks for that. So we'll move on. Talking about related persons. So just as a start, I've lifted some of the words from the FHIR IG, which are essentially the definitional words for related person. So there was just a few interesting things to note there. FHIR has a few different kind of role-based resource types, a patient, practitioner role, and related persons are kind of the big ones probably. So this is really related person is describing a relationship between a patient and someone else, a person, and how that relationship is some basic demographics about the person that's related to the patient, and also how they relate to the patient. And you know, so typically this is aimed at personal or other kind of functional professional relationships between patients and others. It's not really aimed at clinical relationships. So if you're it's not really describing if someone's a doctor for you, or a carer, or sorry, a doctor or a some sort of service provider. So this is really more about individual personal relationships that exist between parties. The main reason we have related person is to be able to use that in a context, and as particularly for things like information sources, and to be able to attribute somebody in a role for a particular context. So we'll go into a bit of that later, but yeah, it's really taking an existing related person and saying, oh, in this case, we're going to use them as a consenting party or an author or things like that. So yeah, it's the ability to be able to have a record of this relation and keep that in a system. And one of the big notes that's worth considering is the advice that this is not necessarily designed for patient contacts. So if you want to keep information about patient contacts directly, that's best done in the actual patient resource, which has some provision to do that. So having said that, you may be a contact and a related person to a patient. So in that sense, there's kind of an advisory on that using the patient's contact element is the best way to the way to get that information recorded, if you want to use that for contact purposes, and then related persons are kind of more just capturing the relationship itself. So we'll go through a few samples of what that means. Danielle.
Hey, I just wanted to, because we haven't done one in a while, and I sort of just wanted to re-go over kind of some of the ways you can interact in the information sessions, because these ones, although we've got we've organized someone who's kind of familiar with the resource and the idea to walk through some things. It's really that opportunity where if you have any questions or you want to talk about your use case or that kind of thing, to at any point in time, just sort of pop your hand up or throw something in the chat, and we'll focus in on that aspect. And just it's I think something that we're really hoping that the people who've come along to this get get a lot out of it, and it ends up being a discussion rather than just kind of being talked at for an hour.
Thanks for doing that, Danielle. I should have framed it a bit better because, yeah, like really, yeah, even comments about a perspective on this stuff is useful, especially for others as well. And there's definitely room for interpretation, in this material as well. So, yeah, any kind of discussion we could have around it is useful and kind of will hopefully craft where the group lands in terms of the decisions that get made. So yeah, I encourage you to comment however you like. Cool. So yeah, so that's some background just from the resource kind of narrative that comes with FHIR. So as an example, we've kind of set up how this might pan out conceptually. So in this case, there's a person, Jane Doe, who has a mobile phone number. And what we have the two kind of resource types of interest: patient and related person. We have ways that person is referred to. So in the related person definition, so we have the ability to say, for this patient, there's a relationship. So Jane Doe is related to the patient. They're the natural mother of the patient, and the contact details are here in the related person. So that's really recording that mother relationship, and referring to the patient that way. So that's capturing essentially the existence of that relationship. But for contact purposes, inside the patient resource, there's actually a specific emergency contact entry, which is also Jane Doe, but that's actually included as details in the patient. So with the recommendation we have in the use related person, the appropriate way to represent emergency contact is in the patient resource itself as a contact, and the way to represent that mother-child relationship is with the related person. So you can see it's a denormalized kind of approach, and FHIR has this throughout its data. So conceptually, there is a person, and there is actually a person resource in FHIR, but that's kind of more just to help with this denormalized version of the world. So there's some redundancy here. So we've kind of got the same entity mentioned in contact and also in related person, and that becomes something that we kind of can understand. So it's more just what we're really kind of delving in is what's appropriate and how to use that that information. So having this established related person, so have this established related person, there's ways we can use this. So in that case, we can say, okay, we might have a composition, which is essentially a document kind of structure in FHIR, and the author of that composition might be a related person. Okay, so in this case, we're just using the related person as the author of the composition. So that's a useful purpose to have a related person. So that might be a document this mother is providing in on behalf of their child, and they want to author a document, and that's a good way to describe it. There's also things like consent. So being able to have a related person give consent for which might be on behalf of someone else, in that context. So yeah, I can see, yeah, question there. So I think that's a good question, actually, Danielle. So just a question, if say Jane Doe changes her mobile number, does it need to be amended in both fields? Yeah, so I think it's that's a good question, and Danielle's answered that. But it really depends too on the nature of your system. If I have a FHIR server storing these resources independently, then yeah, there is this kind of idea that we have this data actually spread across multiple resources. So in theory, you would need to go through, if you wanted to maintain that information across all things, you'd need to have a mechanism to be able to locate everywhere and update it everywhere, which is actually pretty difficult. However, if you had, say, a facade on an existing system, you might have you might actually have a person demographic in your system. So updating at one place updates it in multiple places. So yeah, so it's not necessarily so that things would get updated automatically. And what's Chris saying? Yeah. Anyway, I might let that roll. Does anyone want to add anything to the comments, or you're all happy?
No, I think we're moving on to why there are, and that's what we were talking through in the
Yeah.
comments, why
Yeah.
there are those links from related person into other FHIR resources, like where there was a composition, so a document,
Yeah.
or where there was some kind of record of consent to something, and that because all of that goes beyond contact, like not saying emergency contact or otherwise, for all of those things that go beyond contact, you need the related person resource.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So it's a, whilst related person is in fact a role, because you kind of have somebody in a role with another patient. That related person may be acting in a particular context. So yeah, it may be a consenter, maybe a author, and other reasons that person may be involved in the record. Yeah, so that's a good discussion. It's good. The chat is better than the talk. So just to kind of cover off some of the ideas of things that would typically be in these kinds of relationships. So there's the kind of personal relationship sets. So there's value sets in terminology to kind of back this up. But primarily there's the kind of family relationship concepts. So that's both natural child, sibling, parent kind of relationships, step relationships, adoptive relationships, aunts, uncles, cousins, other family relationships, and then more other more social aspects like neighbor and things like that, which are kind of a useful set of relationships. So there is a value set that supports this, that has a level of detail in terms of those things, as well as those kind of social relationships. There's more functional kinds of relationships, more professional kinds. Next of kin is probably not one of those. Next of kin is really is maybe family, but may not be family. So that's kind of a functional relationship in terms of keeping a record. There's things like guardians, caregivers, employers, employees, power of attorney, and other kinds of known relationships that are not particularly familial or social necessarily. That's a whole nother set of ideas that kind of live in that value set. And what you'll notice is there's not necessarily contact relationships in this set. So it's more sort of continuing known relationships that are not contact oriented. So they're kind of existing social or functional relationships that keep going over time. So yeah, just to get an idea of the ways you might use, which kind of goes to the chat. Definitely, there's ways related persons might be involved in records are kind of like as an information source, as a recipient of information, as a consenting party, authors, witnessing, performing actions, and requesting actions. So yeah, that's a subset of kind of things that are lifted from different uses. So usually that means they're referred to by other FHIR resources as being a party that is involved in that record. So yeah, Chris.
Sorry, I was going to put it in the chat, but it's just too hard. Is one scenario, and I guess it's kind of bordering on that sort of contact piece, information recipients for particular correspondence. So I want my correspondence to go to, my mum and or my dad with these periods of time. Is that a relevant use case?
Yeah, I think that is. Yeah, there's definitely
it's just that crossover with contact. I guess that's the problem.
Yeah, true. And I think that's where it is to me there's kind of that's more I guess relating to things like copy to these people, like which is kind of in the sense it's related, that will be related to some particular request or some particular action, right? And Danielle, did you want to jump in?
Well, it's I think around that that it depends, like on the use case there, I'm trying to say that you want to contact these people in these scenarios. When you want to do that, you'll need related person in some kind of group, or like maybe the communication request resource or the copy to extension. Because I think what goes in patient.contact is really all of these are contacts, and you kind of get to say relationship. So it can be next of kin or emergency, but I think it becomes hard to actually put contextual use case information. And the other thing is it always sits with the patient record then, and it travels around with my record of the patient rather than being maybe specific to this referral or this discharge or things like that. So I think that is a case where you'd want related person.
Yeah, I think that's the difference, isn't it? It's really like a patient contact is essentially it's part of the demographic almost, because it's a standing known contact on the patient wherever that record exists, really. So whereas this can be a little more specific around a particular action or a particular request or a particular document that you're referring to. Yeah. So and really that's really one of these kind of uses are one of the primary reasons related persons exist. So it is common to use them this way. And going back to Michael Osborne's point too, there is this whole just a family structure kind of ability as well, which is all the genealogy kind of things. So you can build up like through the relationships and asserting things through the relationships to be able to kind of find, you could develop family histories even maybe or have definitely do things like decision support, with particular problems with particular types of relationship related parties. So there's kind of some more sophisticated things you can do with the genealogy side just by having that kind of genetic relationship established as well. And so this is really, this sentence was very contemplated, and there's too many words in it, but it's really it's really employing them in not necessarily a particular. They're not always going to be a witness or always be the performer in the future, right? So this is basically picking up an existing related party and turning them into a particular role based on a particular context. So there's that idea coming through. So there's just a selection of places where related person is referred to from FHIR concept. So composition is sort of your document structure. So there's things like author, so a related person party related person has authored a document, maybe attest the document. It's another thing they can do on documents. Grant consent, be the grantee of consent. Information sources for medication statements, and things like provenance, where we have any particular kind of record of activity around a resource that you can identify the related person as being the one it's about or on behalf of someone else. Yeah. So just kind of another example of usage. So this is kind of just trying to tie where you might use things. So we have a composition, which is a document. Say it's a tissue donation consent document. It's particularly a family consent document. We have an author, which is the related person. So the natural mother, Jane Doe, has written this document through presumably for her personal system, and the subject of the document is John Doe, and John Doe. Well, John Doe's mother is Jane Doe, right? So this is about John Doe, but is written by this related person. So this is kind of like an example where this might play out. There's definitely, it's particularly might play out with guardians and other scenarios where you have people acting on behalf of someone or has some authority to kind of represent another party, so that's just an example of where that plays out. All right, we have another Menti. I've forgotten what the question is.
I'm now sharing screen for that. Hopefully other people can see it. And the question is, what uses for related person records are important to you?
But I can't see your screen.
Do whatever magic you did last time to see it.
Anyone else see screen? Is it just me?
It's a good question. Can people see the screen?
Yes, says Brett.
Thanks, David.
You can tell me what's
Thanks,
happening.
Imank.
I can just see the menti.com with the QR code.
It's not just me.
Can you stop sharing, Brett?
Yeah, I can.
Good.
Now I can see it.
Excellent.
My apologies.
I guess it must be some sort of subset. I don't know how it determines it. Who can see it then? How interesting.
Yeah, I still can't see it. I don't know what's going on.
So we've got
Tell me what's happening.
family
I can see it.
connections.
I've worked it out. There's a tab at the top.
Okay.
Amazing. Oh, great.
Yep.
So it seems, yeah. We'll talk more about contacts because, yeah, this is kind of aspects of that idea. Yeah.
I think there's clearly some roles coming through where you've got authoring,
Yeah.
like patient summary authoring, or maybe attesting. So that content is coming from a related person, whether in some cases that might be a parent or a carer or some other kind of relationship around that. And I think workplace health check, yeah, obviously around employer employee and things around power of attorney. If it's not just contact details, but actually representing, that relationship and otherwise, then absolutely makes sense, especially if that comes into acting in relation through use cases where you want to say the person who either this information is provided to or who has consented to this or otherwise is the person who has power of attorney. I think the same with advanced care directives. That all seems to be, I think, what we were probably expecting about the really common use cases in terms of use of a related person.
Perfect. Yeah, this is good. I think, yeah, and I think, yeah, as we go through this work, this kind of thing, these kind of cases are worth considering and saying, how would you achieve each of these, you know, using what we have. Cool.
Might stop
And it will, yeah,
sharing.
that's great. Thank you. Okay. Yes, Heath.
I'm just wondering, the person that talked about the family relationships, it's gone now, I can't remember the exact words. I wonder whether that was to actually tie them back to the actual patient record as well, associated with that, to actually tie together like the patient record of a mother and the patient record of a baby. Or was that the intent of that one, or was it just simply to have a list of family members and their names and contact addresses and stuff?
That might have been me, Heath. So generally in genetic testing, you test the proband, which is the index case. So it's someone who is potentially got some genetic disorder. And then you want to test the mother and father to see if they're carriers. And so all of that information gets put into one report, generally, but it might be multiple reports. So it's a bit hard. It depends on the lab.
Okay.
I think that genetic linkage stuff is, there's lots of preventative care too that has kind of genetic linkage kind of criteria. So I think it's something, it's not done well that I've seen, but it's certainly, I have seen it done where kind of specific relationships are investigated, like, yeah, to see if siblings have problems similar, you know, which puts you in a higher risk category and things like that. So yeah. Anyway, cool. All right. So, well, I don't know.
We've kind of
Now we're onto
answered that.
We've kind of answered that a bit, but yeah, just if there's, yeah, it was. This is really seeking like what would people, what do people actually do, you know, with the related person records. So I think we've kind of got some info on that with the word cloud. So, was there anything else anyone wanted to add to that? Not really.
What's lacking for me is like the system I'm thinking of has the ability to record family members, but actually links the family member to their patient record as well. And that's what's lacking in the related person resource.
Is that the link though from the patient resource, patient back to related person?
Yeah. Yeah, because there is a reference, yeah, to patient from related person. I
The
brought
other
up
way
the R4
around,
definition.
To a patient, yes.
Yeah.
But not to the actual related person's patient record.
Yeah. Yeah, if there is one. There may not be one.
I
So
thought that was from the patient resource.
No, so
Yeah,
like
no,
if I'm the
if you
patient,
have one, that's patient.link or whatever.
Hmm.
Like if you actually want to explicitly state that I have a patient record and a related person record for the same individual, there are ways to do that. And Chris is right, it comes from the patient and points out.
yeah, but that's my other patient records. Like as if I'm the patient, link is used for linking to other
Yeah.
records that represent me, including the related person being my related person. Okay, so
It needs to
maybe
go through the person resource in FHIR, which is how you connect the multiple records, the different expressions of it all together. Like, let's say it's so big that you've even got you're a provider, a practitioner, and you actually go to this hospital as well, and you're related to other people, and they might have a person resource sitting behind there that links all of those things together. They could.
Yeah. Yeah. So
but it's
there's
the
enough
link is
there,
about the same actual person. Whereas the related person patient is like me, but this related person record is about my wife. I'm the patient.
Yeah, but yeah,
Yeah.
you would have to set up the relationship.
So there's no way to actually get a link to my wife from my patient record. To my wife's patient record from my record.
Oh, you could do a search. I get what you
Search
mean.
on what?
Yeah, you need two searches. Yeah, yeah.
And it might be
Yeah.
deliberate, right? So because of privacy,
It's
it might be
possible.
designed this way that it's
No,
deliberate.
it's possible, but it's edge case. But it is possible to, if you think that there is a record, to do that via searches it includes and like actually then go through that. I don't know if that's, I don't really think that's what we care too much about in terms of AU core. I think that's going into some edge case stuff.
I agree.
Yeah. That sounds like fun in the connectathon. The yep. Cool. So what, yeah, so what's on screen now is the R4 FHIR R4 definition of related person. So these are all the elements that a related person resource has. So you can see it covers some of the key things we'd expect, but also there's quite a lot of detail there in terms of like including things like identifiers for that related person, genders, birth dates, even a photo if you have one, so there's a bit of an overlap in terms of the demographic content with what is in a patient record as well. So yeah, it's really capturing some a fairly good set of demographic detail about the related person. And the core things are kind of the reference back to patient that they're related to, which is required one-to-one. So this is kind of, I guess, some background on that. So whilst
I think we can just bop on.
Yeah, bop on to that. Yeah, so to give some more context, AU base is our base profiles where we add some things for Australian context that we think are relevant for when related person gets used. So this is an existing profile in AU base. So it introduces some extensions for gender identity pronouns, recorded sex and gender. So some of the related to the gender harmony work. This is similar to what the patient definitions have. And there's also a set of kind of individual identifiers here, IHI, Medicare numbers, and other card numbers that are relevant for an individual. And we do create some bindings to terminology. So there is a related person relationship type set, which is something that will get inherited by AU Core. So that's already at an extensible level. It's one of the few places in AU base that has extensible binding. So we would inherit that in AU Core if we're basing it on AU base, which I think we will. And we do have a languages binding as well for communication. So that's to give you a flavor of what's kind of coming in through AU base. And I think the the thing we're kind of looking at now for AU Core is really to say what things in this going backwards. Sorry, scrolling is not working. Oh, sorry, my system is having troubles. All right, get back to where I was. Yeah, so just from so we have to really decide which elements are relevant, and we think we need to support for the AU Core profile. So just to talk about what we do with AU Core profiling. So the first bit's really just to remind what AU Core is about. So we're really looking at kind of the minimum requirements for Exchange, having the ability to work across many use cases, or really all use cases if possible. So make it really generalized and usable. Set some minimum expectations for systems to meet, and also for consumers to expect, and really with the interactions that we need to have to talk about the demographics for a related person. So it's really what things are really going to be everywhere and useful all the time, and trying to do that. And there's a link through to the principles for inclusion. My browser has completely.
I'll drop it in the chat.
Thank you very much, because my browser has blown up. Right, so I think, oh no, it's working now.
I think just time warning for it. There's 15 minutes
Yeah.
left.
Yeah, cool. So basically the proposal is to do a light touch kind of activity. We want to flag some elements with must support. So they're the things with some obligations attached to them. We expect systems to provide. We have this responder and requester actors in our kind of definition, so there'll be obligations on them, and to define the minimum data quality rules that we need to have. So things that we really need to have to make the resource usable. And so there's a couple of examples there, like we maybe need a name or a relationship to make it make sense. Maybe if you have a name, you need to have a text name or a given name or a family name, at least, right? Because so there's kind of this minimal requirement to meet. So with that, there's been a proposal drawn up. So there is actually a branch that has this a profile available, which is kind of the working version of the AU Core proposal. So with that, it's picked up a number of elements in the must support. So they're all marked SO, so they're the only ones we're showing here. So that includes patient, which I think you need to relate to somebody, and it's mandatory anyway. There's the relationship of how you relate to them, the name, and then maybe parts of the name being populated, and telecom, which includes things like telephone numbers, emails, and so forth, and possibly addresses. So this is kind of our minimal proposal, and probably is the crux of what's good, what's bad with the proposal. We do pull through this extensible value set, which defines the relationships we kind of recognize, they're coded. And we have included two invariants, which one is that you either need a name or relationship or both. to be populated, and that names must have one part filled in, so it must have a name value attached to the name. So it's either going to have like a full name representation or a family name or a given name as part of the record. So yeah, and I think I'd just like to open the floor to see if people have
Mostly
perspective.
questions, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah, that would be interesting. Because some of this is what we had the questions around the use cases and how people would use this. Do you need more concepts than is shown here? Is it necessary for your use case? Or are there things here that you would never know? Does anyone want to have a go at I guess relating that to what they either need or regularly capture in their systems?
It's Chris. I mean, it looks reasonable from my perspective in the scenario where you're wanting to send out correspondence to certain parties in a certain sequence potentially. Not certain sequence, but certain type of related person. I can get their email address and their name for that correspondence, so it would fit my use case.
Cool. So yeah, and we have obligations.
Could I ask,
Yeah,
sorry,
go,
associated
go,
with,
go,
because there are
go
a few
ahead.
people who put in the patient summary use case, and I'm interested for anyone on the line who put in patient summary if they could comment on, I guess, what fields they would end up using in relation to patient summary. All right.
Name basically.
Cool. So yeah, I just have a query, like with the and go on then.
Oh, just a quick one. So some of these we won't have, but I think that's fine because this is just going to be populated if known, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's fine. So I think we won't have address and use, but I have no problem if there's other use cases for those. Cool, thanks.
Yeah, that's good. And I was going to just query about this. Oh golly, query on this variant. So which basically makes this a conditionally required. So either relationship or name, or both. Does that make sense to people? Because it's like, is it worth having a related person if you don't have a name or a relationship described? Go on, Heath.
Oh, that's the point, isn't it? Like, I've got a mother.
No, so I've got a consent scenario where all we're actually recording is that it was actually a guardian that gave consent. We're actually not capturing the name of the guardian. So to your point, you could just say it's mother without actually saying who the mother is, and you can kind of get the details of the mother elsewhere. So it's just a matter of, yeah. So the relationship instead of a name is something that I've seen.
Yeah, I can see like this invariant actually matches what US Core has a profile on this as well, and that matches what they do. So I guess it's whether that makes sense.
And it makes sense, like without a name, it's useless, but with a relationship, there is some value.
Yeah. Yeah, so you want one of them at least. And so would be people happy with the case where you didn't know the relationship? and just had a name, which that's what he said. So just
Noting,
had a
because that
relation.
means
Yeah,
they might be employed by, they might be the employer of, like it doesn't imply
Yeah.
familiar relation. There's a code for family. If you know it's
Yeah.
family somehow, but you don't know how, there's a code for that.
yeah.
So you
Okay.
would supply it. But if you have no idea, it might be an employment related thing, or it might be a familial related thing. That would be where you don't provide it at all. Is that acceptable?
Well,
Yeah, I'm
isn't
thinking
there
of like
isn't there an
like
employment
witness.
relationship?
No, that is in the relationship value. There's an employer code or an employee code, like
Yeah.
there is family member code.
Yeah.
Sorry, then what
related-
was your question?
My question was, when it says related, often I wonder if when we're saying it's okay, we don't know the relationship, if there is actually this implicit assumption that we know their family in some way, but we don't know how. That's not the same as unknown relationship, because relationship can have like employer employee. So if you actually know they're a family member but don't know the specifics, whether it's related through marriage or by genetics or some other kind of way like surrogacy, then you can put something in the relationship field. And is it useful for our use cases where we have no idea of the relationship, as in they may be the employer of the patient, not just not familial, I guess.
Yeah. I think too, like I can think of cases where you just have a name and no relationship defined, it like a one-off case, where you have, say, a witness document where you just have a name and address or something like that.
Oh, is that what
Um,
you're alluding to? That there is a name but no relationship? Is that what you're?
Yes.
Oh, okay, right. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Does that make sense where we know they're related somehow? We've got their name, but we don't know if that is an employer relationship or a family relationship or a neighbor or any of those things.
I think the challenge is, again, the way that systems are capturing this information. And if they're not specifying the relationship explicitly through the user interface, what do you put as the relationship if you force them? So if the fields are simply just a full name, in other words, chuck it in the text, if we're forcing them to put a relationship on it, what
Which
is
is
the
the classic,
default?
classic document witness, just has a name and possibly
Exactly.
address. Yeah.
So I think you have to allow a name without a relationship because of the limitations of the user interfaces, and it just starts getting arbitrary otherwise.
And then that makes sense at AU core level, which needs to go across all use cases. So we've got legitimate use cases, and I think we've just talked about two. Then I think that makes sense to keep it like this, where you need one or the other at AU core, and then we leave it to the downstream use cases for whatever they are to say. But in my particular case, I actually need this to be present. Okay.
All right. Any further 2 cents?
I have a question about use. Probably not so much from the responder's perspective because of the if known, but it probably puts a bit of an onus on the requester because I guess it's only not error.
Yeah.
True. I mean, forecasting, that's a previously agreed TDG position. We've already voted on that. So that needs to be in the proposal, and then we can choose to revisit it
In the
later.
context of related person.
Yep. Sure is. There's an agreed JIRA
That's
on
an
it.
issue. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And it was part of the gender harmony suite of going the appropriate name to use.
Yes, we
That was in
considered
the
all the
context
different
of a
aspects.
patient.
No.
There's
There's
multiple resource types.
in all the gender harmony things, we considered all three. And for every element, for all the other elements except for name to use, the TDG voted that they did not want to put mass support on those items. So we amended the proposal. For the proposal for name to use, only practitioner was removed, and we explicitly agreed and documented in the minutes that name to use for related person in R2 would be must support. It's
Okay.
minuted. Doesn't mean we won't
It's going to ballot. Yeah.
reconsider that, but that's the reason it is present, is because that's already been approved, if you will. Can you go to the next slide, Brett? Just
Yeah, we've got to
just-
move on. Yeah.
I've got some things in the chat there about so I've put some of those links in the chat already for people to actually go look at that proposal. And if you have the feedback, like I think Heath has already provided some saying, this doesn't make sense to me, or if there are things where you're like saying, I think you're missing something, there's a link to a Confluence page there. I did put it in the chat where it would be really great if you could put in your feedback. There's other things here around interactions, like when we talked about searching, what our search capabilities and interactions are is also part of the proposal. And if you've got any feedback on those as well, please provide it. I'm just going to drop the links to all of those things just in the chat again here.
So just
there's that.
So I'll just show what's on the end of these. So there's a Confluence page with this material on it, with some ability feedback, thanks to those who've already started. And that goes on, not just the profile kind of content, but also into the searching. So and just getting some feedback on those search requirements. And that's related to this, as Danielle said, this draft profile. So there's a branch here with this profile in it. It has all the detail here. So so this is kind of what we'll be working on and updating based on decisions. And that includes also the search parameters we've looked at, and also there are associated capability statement entries as well, which go down into the interaction requirements. So basically, it's pretty much aligned with the other things that have already happened in AU Core as much as possible. But obviously we need to decide in detail about all the things we're going to support and not support.
Hello. Just had a question for clarification for my understanding on this. The related person, so are we using it to get a related person's medication history or a patient history or family history? But let's say a related person, they are related, but the second person doesn't has a consent on it. How does that work? Like,
That's
like
not
my
in
half brother,
scope. We're not going to talk.
we are
We're not
related.
going to talk. We're not going to talk about
You can
it.
get medication history of me, and then you can query the related person's medication history. But if the second person says, no, I don't want to consent the medication history,
I think all of
or
that's kind of not
family
really
history with that,
what we're
how
talking
does
about.
that work? I'm not sure.
Authorization and access isn't handled in AU Core.
We can't hear you, sorry. Echo.
Authorization and access isn't defined by AU Core. That's through a number of separate agreements. AU Core defines some of the minimum requirements around the data and the rules on that around terminologies or identifiers or minimum data quality rules. And then we also define some of the rules around what are the things I can search on, and where can I provide related person information? So there's things around where you're saying medications. So medication request does have a number of spots where a related person can be used. And there are some obligations on systems that respond to those requests for data. But in terms of dealing with authorization and access, that's outside the sphere of AU Core.
Yeah, because that will be dependent on what the rules are, whatever context you're in anyway, right? So that's something to be managed for a particular usage. I think because like what Danielle's saying about, like, once we have this profile, we will be able to refer to it from other resources as well. So that can, maybe give you better expectations, what to expect when those things are populated in AU Core usage as well. So that's quite helpful, I think.
Yeah.
Rather than leaving it open. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that information. It's just clarification. So consent is, if I understand correct, consent is totally different thing from the relation property here. So consent can be managed by something else.
Yeah.
It's a different resource in a way. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Because consent and access to data is really it's policy driven kind of thing. So there's ways to represent consent in FHIR, but still you need to actually make that happen if you want to actually apply the policy and things like that. But it may be built into the roles and access into the server itself or something like that. So I think that's not really in scope. We're not really talking about implying any particular access. Yeah.
Well,
We'll tell you how
clarifying.
to access, not that you have the right to. Yeah.
And thanks for your question.
Yeah, it's good.
All right, shall we wrap it up then? Because I think we've hit time.
We have, yeah. So we've got till the 4th of Feb for feedback, which is next Tuesday, end of the day, and then we'll be rolling up anything from that feedback into another proposal for the actual meeting on Thursday.
Yeah, and if you have any questions as well, the link I dropped at the bottom on watch this chat topic for updates. You can also post any questions that you have in there, and we monitor that, and we'll be putting, announcements and updates ourselves, as well as responding to any questions around AU Core, including related person. Yeah.
So
Thanks
if there's
very
anything
much.
bothering you or you want to make a comment, yeah, that's a good place. Cool. No
Thanks,
worries.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
See you there.